Welcome to part 2 of Technology and Gifted. During this part of the presentation, I will be looking at authentic learning projects. All the projects that we're going to view were created for gifted students in a gifted and talented program, ranging from year 4 to year 6. The first project was a science project done by a Year 6 class. The purpose of this project was to explore the basic physics of bridges. The goal was that students would develop an understanding through experimentation of which shapes are the most structurally sound. The project provided a practical application of physics in the real-world context. Students were asked to build a bridge. Questions were posed which the students had to answer, and the engineering design process poster was used as a guide to show them what are expected of them. Firstly, they had to identify a problem, in this case, which structure would be the strongest. Then they had to brainstorm different ideas, design a bridge, build it, test it, redesign if not necessary, and share their solution. The students were provided with building parameters. The bridge needed to be able to clear a gap of 40 centimeters. The bridge were not allowed to weigh more than 1 kilogram, and they were only allowed to use spaghetti and a hot glue gun to construct their bridges. Now, during the activity, the students were to research the bridge designs. They were to plan and draw their bridge designs. They need to keep in mind that the aim was to build a bridge that can hold a kilogram of weight. The students then built their bridges, and the bridges were showcased to the parents during a science hour, after which the experimentation started and each bridge test was video recorded. The experimentation started with a 200 gram weight and was increased in 100 gram increments. The students used the videos that was taken during the testing process to discuss the pros and cons of each bridge afterwards. There was an assessment done. The diagnostics were basically to find out whether the students are able to use the science language correctly and whether able to use the research to inform their decisions. Summative assessment, the students had to submit their final projects for testing, during which we looked at whether they followed the instructions, whether their designs adhere to the restrictions, and then we used the video recordings for peer assessment. Looking at these pictures that I've got here, this is one of my Year 6 students working on building her bridge. She used spaghetti bundles and glued them together. Now, this bridge was the one that held the most weight. It cleared the 1 kilogram weight limit, and although aesthetically it might not have been the most pleasing design, it was definitely the strongest. Project 2 was a literacy project that was done by a Year 4 class. The purpose was use of meaningful ways to encourage students to use descriptive language to visualize ideas and then use these ideas to create images. Now, the outline was that the students had to create a new superhero. They had to write a detailed description about the superhero's physical attributes, And then they had to write a description as to what made this character qualify for being a superhero. The students then had to use Drawcast to draw the characters based on the physical description, and later the students then had to use the image from Drawcast to create a 5-minute digital presentation showcasing their superheroes. Now the assessment was done diagnostically. We looked at, can the students create innovative ideas, or are they regenerating existing ones? And then summatively, the students had to present their 5-minute presentations for assessment. The image here was drawn by one of my Year 4 students as her superhero, who was Kitty Cat. Project 3 was a literacy project done by a Year 5 class, Tragedy in Eggsville. We used the nursery rhyme Humpty Dumpty as our base, and the purpose for this was to use the known to create the unexpected, whilst find meaningful reasons to write. Now the project objective was for students to set themselves into the role of detectives. They were to compile a list of questions from the remembering and understanding domains of Bloom's taxonomy, which they would use for interview purposes. In their role, and they will then have to investigate Humpty's fall by looking at the crime scene and recording the interviews with witnesses and suspects. The witnesses and suspects were students from our class. Students then had to compare the information and draw conclusions to make inferences and compile their final report in poster form. These posters were assessed and then displayed in the classroom. Now, as a diagnostic assessment, we looked at whether the students were able to formulate higher order questions, and then whether they were able to make conclusions and inferences from the information obtained. The fourth project was a maths-based project done with a Year 6 class. And the setting was the Minecraft game platform. And before we could start this project, we had to make sure that the students had the following prior knowledge. Firstly, they had to be familiar with the Minecraft game platform, where students, or rather players, needed to construct communities that are aesthetically appealing and structurally sound, and they did the building in this environment using Unifix-like blocks. All building material use the exact same block sizes, and you can see a picture here with all the different types of building materials and the little blocks they represented. Next, they had to make sure that they had the following maths concepts. They had to have the basic understanding of area and perimeter. The purpose of this project was to pose meaningful problems that encourage students to use area and perimeter vocabulary and demonstrate their understanding. In order to do the task, the students were given a set of questions that they had to work through and answer. And the task was to design a house with an area of 60 blocks. They had to show the plan and their mathematical calculations. They had to build the house in the Minecraft environment. And lastly, they had to compile a report with all their plans and calculations, as well as a photo of the final house. This assessment was based on could the students use the mathematical language correctly, and Um, the students then had to submit their work with photographs of their houses for assessment at the end. Finally, I've compiled a list of websites and apps that's very useful within a classroom. This brings us to the conclusion of our presentation. Thank you for listening.